What the hell is going on with Glenn Greenwald? Hey everyone, and welcome to another discussion on The Rational National. As you'll see, I spoke with journalist Eoin Higgins a couple days ago on his new piece about Glenn Greenwald that does an analysis on his movement towards the right over the past few years. So, a lot of people aren't on Twitter. They aren't really always up to date on who people are. So I think for many people, this may be eye opening. But Greenwald is somebody that, a lot of us that are in this work have respected because of the great work that he has done in the past, as Eoin Higgins will discuss in this interview. But the movement towards the right in defending Fox News and going on there just to be on their side and spout what they're spouting is really bizarre. So Eoin Higgins has some actual data to back this up. He has an analysis on this. I'll link to his piece and his Twitter bio as well below the video, so you can check that out and read through it all if you want. But here is the interview now with Eoin Higgins on his piece about Glenn Greenwald. I'm joined now by journalist Eoin Higgins. Eoin, welcome to the show.
David, thanks for having me.
So you have a new piece out titled Company Man, the Data Behind Glenn Greenwald's Twitter Loyalty to Fox News. I'll link to it below this video on YouTube. Now, before we get deep into this, for those that don't know who Glenn Greenwald is or who he was, can you start by giving people sort of a summary of what Glenn Greenwald was known for prior to making this most recent turn?
Yeah, Greenwald began his career in 2006 as I would say, somewhat libertarian left blogger who opposed the excesses of the Bush security state. He was a really essential voice in a lot of ways at the time. You know, going against the kind of the surveillance and the TSA and the wars, and I mean, he kind of ran the gamut on that stuff. He became a writer for Salon and The Guardian, and in I believe 2013 he helped publish the Snowden documents. Edward Snowden, changed the world for the better. I would argue probably one of, if not the biggest journalistic efforts of my lifetime. Completely upended the world order in a lot of ways by revealing the extent of U.S. involvement in spying not only on citizens but on world leaders and people around the world and around the country. And then he also and then he founded The Intercept, the left-leaning investigative reporting website that's been going strong for, I think, 7 years at this point. Full disclosure, I have written for them on numerous occasions. And he left them in October 2020 over a disagreement on the editing process for a story that he was writing on Hunter Biden and the Hunter Biden laptop, which was at the time that it happened was, it was kind of unclear on how credible the information was. It was being spread by Rudy Giuliani. It was in the midst of an election. The editors of The Intercept, and so I wrote about this for fairness and accuracy in reporting. I talked to Greenwald over the phone for over an hour in an exclusive interview about this. I talked to Roger Hodge and Betsy Reed, who are editors of The Intercept, as well as a number of other people involved tangentially on background. And essentially what happened was, Greenwald believed in this story. They wanted him to soften the language and to tone it down. He refused. He called it censorship. He quit. He joined Substack. And since then, he's been appearing more on Fox News, and his politics have really taken a right-wing partisan turn. And that's kind of where we find ourselves now.
Yeah, and just to briefly on the Hunter Biden stuff, for me, this really was, I guess, the eye-opening moment. I mean, but before then, it was obvious, it was clear that Greenwald had been moving more to the right in some of his positions, but at least publicly. But in the middle of an election, like, is Hunter Biden really the most important? I think this is really, for me, what is so weird about Greenwald is the things he focuses on compared to what he used to focus on, like the surveillance state, these huge issues, and now Hunter Biden's laptop, Joe Biden's son. Like, who cares? This is like, it doesn't matter. But this is where we get into your research. So a lot of people, may recognize Greenwald his the great work that he's done in the past, but a lot of people aren't on Twitter. I don't think are really aware of this obvious turn that he has made. What has your research on this shown? What did you find?
Yeah, so Greenwald has 1.7 million Twitter followers. He posts a lot. I would say he posts up to 100 times a day. If he's arguing with somebody, he fights with people all the time on there. It is an essential part of his platform, his Twitter and his use of it. He is using Substack. He is using the video service Rumble. He's using the podcast service Callin. These are all deals he has with different VC investors. Well, I'm sorry, that's a misstatement. He doesn't have a deal with the investors. He has a deal with the companies that come after they get the investments, which makes sense because he's a big name and you would want to have him. But his Twitter account is certainly where he has the largest reach and influence. So I think that his behavior on that website is very important to pay attention to, and it is very relevant because he is I would say he's one of the most famous journalists in the world, and so what he says matters. So since leaving The Intercept, since joining Substack, Greenwald has also started to appear on Fox News with even more frequency than before. Now, he's always been, for about a year and a half, he's been appearing on the Tucker Carlson show quite often, something that he's frequently asked to explain because of Carlson's far-right, extreme racist and bigoted views on any number of subjects, including homosexuality and trans identity and all, even outside of race. I mean, this guy is a through and through bigot. But Greenwald appears on there quite frequently. They're very friendly. He defends Carlson all the time. He also tweets very positively about Fox News, including a lot of the time, when he's defending his positions on it, but also with increasing frequency, he is doing it just in general, just to say, hey, check out this person who's going to be on Fox, or look at Fox's ratings, isn't that great? So all that kind of stuff. So one thing that he frequently says is that he is a independent journalist and he just tells the truth and he just goes after whoever. So I felt like that wasn't true, even though Glenn has had me blocked for a long time, but I had a feeling that wasn't true. So I went through his tweets since September 2016 to see how his attitude to the network has changed. Now, thing is that no matter how awful MSNBC and CNN are, and I should say that I pretty much completely agree with all of Greenwald's attacks on MSNBC and CNN, which I consider to be equally bad as Fox, just in a different way. I think they're absolutely horrible. So I think he's completely right about that. But he doesn't subject Fox to the same scrutiny. So I went through this and I found that since late 2020 and certainly since 2021, he has tweeted almost exclusively positively about Fox. There was, I think, since April 30th, 2020, there have only been 2 tweets that were critical. They were in mid-May 2021, and they were both about Fox's coverage of the Israel-Palestine conflict, which, by the way, he's completely right about. Yes, like that is like they should be covering it at a bare minimum with a little bit more of a focus on the voices of the Palestinians, but they don't, obviously, because they're a far right network, which Greenwald knows. I mean, this is the frustrating thing, is that he knows this, but he just won't say it for obvious reasons. So I went through it and I just found that that these spikes happened, especially come 2021. And then I got Media Matters for America sent me a list of 105 appearances that he had made. I plugged a couple in that I had found because they didn't have any on the weekends or prior to October 2017. And then what I found was that his appearances line up with his positive tweets almost on a one-to-one basis, especially once you hit 2021. Once you hit 2021, the spikes are pretty much like in line with each other.
Yeah.
And so just this isn't groundbreaking in the sense that it's not like anybody didn't know that this was the case, but it is striking to see the data laid out in a graph.
Yeah, I think what's really incredible about it is just the obvious shift. And, it's one thing if he was honest about his positions or his honest about, his worldview. I mean, if he came out and just said, yeah, I'm a conservative, whatever, then it wouldn't be that much of a deal. But it's the fact that he had the buildup of this fantastic reporting that he has in the past and is sort of riding off that to now sell people on Fox News. And, oftentimes people come back and say, well, he goes on Fox News to try and make the argument, to try and educate people, educate the viewers of Fox News into a different perspective, like Bernie Sanders did, during his town hall in 2020. But is that what Greenwald's doing? Like when he's on Tucker, like what have you noticed from his appearances on Fox News? Is he actually challenging Tucker, or is he doing something else?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen any challenge to Tucker from Greenwald. I mean, I'm sure that. I mean, maybe he does, but I haven't really seen it. You know, they did an interview when Greenwald was still at The Intercept, I think in 2017, 2018, where Greenwald pushed him on some of his views. But and you can find that at The Intercept, and also Greenwald has a couple of clips from it on a Medium post that he did on it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, and I say this in the article, my methodology is subjective. I'm not going to pretend that I had some like special formula to decide what was a negative and a positive tweet, but I feel confident about my conclusions and about how I rated them. And I just don't think that you can possibly say that his social media posting or his appearances have been in any way critical of Fox in any way whatsoever. And in fact, especially in the latter half so far of 2021, I mean, they've been like glowing to the point of like that's what you say when you're really trying to make a great impression on someone. Like that's the kind of stuff that he's doing at this point. I mean, like you can't even pretend now that there's that there's anything else going on.
Yeah, and he's continuing to still criticize MSNBC and CNN, which is good, as you said. I agree with those criticisms, but to criticize he's now shifted from basically criticizing the corporate media to criticizing the liberal corporate media, as if that's the only issue. There isn't an issue with Fox News. Like, to try and play this game, it's just so disingenuous, and it makes it hard to take him seriously. If he were to do some good reporting on something, it's hard to take that seriously now because of this persona that he's taken on. It's just really, I don't know, it's really bizarre. Now, I know you don't get into motivation. We don't know what the motivation is, but I don't know. Do you speculate? Like, is there any idea as to why he's doing this? Is it because he lost that Intercept money? Now he's trying to make it back in a different way. Like, do you have any ideas to what's going on here?
I mean, to be clear, Greenwald has said repeatedly that he doesn't get paid for his appearances on Fox News, and I take him at his word on that. I think that there's no reason to think that he's not telling the truth about that. However, when he appears on Fox News, his Substack is promoted. His Substack relies on subscriptions. And so I think it's disingenuous to say that there's no financial incentive for him to appear on Fox News. Whether or not that's the motivation, I mean, maybe he just decided that Fox News was great and that all of his previous criticisms basically are no longer valid. And that, I mean, to me, the most disingenuous part of this is that he defends this stuff by saying that because Democrats control both houses of Congress and the White House, and have MSNBC and CNN, then Fox is really the underdog. Like they are representing like the underdog. And then he says this, and then within hours or days he posts these rating charts that show that Fox News dominates cable news. Dominates. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah.
Like they are like the top. They are most of, if not all of, the top 10 or 20 every month. So I don't know how you can possibly say that the cable network that has this much control over the zeitgeist and the way that cable news media is being consumed is somehow the underdog, or that you're somehow like bucking convention by speaking positively about them exclusively. But that is what he's saying. I mean, he obviously hasn't responded. I mean, as of right now, as far as I've seen, has not responded directly to my article. But I did notice that this morning he posted something. It was like a quote by Chomsky saying he doesn't write about Fox News because there's no point. Liberal media is much more important to write about. And I think I agree with Chomsky. I agree that, but for Greenwald to post that leaves out the fact that Greenwald does regularly write about Fox News. He just doesn't write about it in a critical sense. He writes about it exclusively positively.
Yeah.
So it's honestly quite disappointing to me that someone with such an incredible journalistic career, up until a couple of years ago, or up until about a year ago, and someone who's done like such important work and has, again, without question, changed the world for the better with the NSA reporting alone. With the NSA reporting alone, like that is a world historical event and piece of reporting that he was a part of, and along with Laura Poitras and Edward Snowden, and I think that is still a good thing, but it is really disappointing to watch him just turn into. I mean, you can go to his Twitter timeline or read his Substack or watch his appearances on Fox. This is just a run-of-the-mill conservative partisan.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more to it. There's no point to even pretend that it's anything else is going on here.
Yeah.
So
I'm completely in line with you. This is very disappointing. And, I read your piece not as necessarily a tear down of Greenwald, but more as to point out that it's sad that this is who he has now become. And, what was your motivation with the piece? Like, do you hope that he changes? Do you think he can change? He will change? Like, did you write it to tear him down, or really was it just sort of like an analysis of who this man now is?
I'm sure that there was I mean, I just basically wrote it because I just think that it's completely disingenuous and hypocritical for him to pretend that anything else is going on here.
Yeah.
And I guess in that way, maybe it's a teardown, but I really tried to be as fair as possible. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt on every single point that I could. And but yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think with something like this, like my personal feelings on Greenwald aside, the data speaks for itself. The information speaks for itself, and I don't really need to make it be anything else than that.
Yeah. And also, I mean, just anyone that's on Twitter and follows his stuff is aware of the turn. I mean, he actually blocked me recently as well. So, but I have other accounts. But then again, like this is right. Just it's sad. But anyways, I'll link to your piece below the video. It's a great read. It really is an analysis on what has happened over the years to Greenwald and what he is, how he puts himself out there. But where can people find you?
You can find me on my Substack, which you'll link to below. It's called The Flashpoint. It's at eoinhiggins.substack.com, EoinHiggins.substack.com. You can also find me on Twitter at EoinHiggins_, and I write for a bunch of places, but all my work gets filtered through there. So.
All right, great. And I'll link to all that below the video as well. Thanks again, Eoin, for coming on.